I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. On our last review, we mentioned that we were going to take a couple albums here to go away from the the great 2013 releases we've been reviewing. We're kind of in a lull. Sometimes Tom and I need to recharge on some classics because, honestly, not this is a bad thing, but all we really get to listen to on a regular basis is the albums we're reviewing. But there's a lot of albums out there that I love, that I want to love, and then also want to share our thoughts with you guys. And so it's very important that we take the time every once in a while to do some throwback albums, whether those be requests or albums that we've had in our personal backlog that we want to share with you guys. Today, we're going to review Talking Heads' magnum opus, Remain in Light, arguably magnum opus. Now, Tom, you know a lot about music history. You may have had like a degree in it. You don't. I don't. But could you talk about Talking Heads a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they're one of the most intriguing bands to listen to in the history of music.
I would agree with that.
I would say. I mean, their first album came out in 1977. This is their fourth album, came out in 1980. Do the math there. They put out an album a year for the first
Back
4
in the good
years.
old days when bands would do that
every
year.
Just pumped out.
Now it's like 4 years between
no kidding.
albums.
It makes things
Screw
difficult.
you,
But even so, I mean, these guys, it's almost Beatles-esque in how much their sound changed in that short a span of time. Going from Talking Heads 77, which was this kind of like art punk new wave sound, a little more guitar based. Some more songs about building and food was more so, got a little bit more experimental. Fear Music, moving more towards the experimental side even, and then Remain in Light, where they just went completely off the deep end.
They absolutely did.
And considering this came out in 1980, oh my god, it is one of the most forward-thinking albums of all time, I would say. It completely set the stage for so much of what happened in the 80s, and it was right at the beginning of the 80s that it came out.
If you were to put this album on right now, having never listened to Talking Heads ever, or ever listened to Remain in Light, obviously, ever, I think that you would find that this album is very modern. It would fit in with the music that you would listen to today. And you know, I know that there's people out there who really have gotten into music, but haven't gone and familiarized themselves with classic albums like Remain in Light or any other of the Talking Heads original albums. And I feel like that this is a good one because it would translate so well. It's a good one, a good stepping stone back into like classic era works of rock music. Now, Remain in Light, you have to keep in mind, David Byrne was kind of going on a crazy direction. He was playing with like another band at the time, and to dispel those rumors, you know, he was getting into a lot of these like African mythologies and like Afrobeat music, world beat music. He was experimenting with all this. He's a true artist. He's a visionary. Like, he experiments. That's what he does. Even to this day, playing with, you know, St. Vincent now on Love This Giant from 2011, or was that 2012? 2012. We're actually going to see them here in 2 days, so we're really excited about that. But back to Remain in Light, you know, when he did this, he brought Talking Heads in as the band who was going to make this really visionary album, and it does. You can clearly hear the world beat influences, the African rhythms. You can hear that throughout this album. The other thing you have to keep in mind here is that this album is just batshit crazy when it comes to David Byrne's vocals. He is all over this place. Take a look at these hands! And I mean, he's yelling at times, and it's just this prophetic, like, belching out to you. And the lyrics are stream of consciousness lyrics, which I thought was pretty interesting. I mean, it's a revolutionary approach. Actually, Kid A was, Tom York took the main idea from Kid A. If you actually listen to Remain in Light and then listen to Kid A, you will note a lot of similarities because they kind of crafted Kid A after Remain in Light, especially in the lyrics. And I think that that's what makes this album so special. It really gives a unique look on how you write music. You know, some of these songs originated from jams. Some of them are a bit more structured. I would say that, you know, the way that the album was originally released on vinyl, you know, you had the first 3 tracks, Born Under Punches, The Heat Goes On, which is my favorite Talking Heads song, period. And then Crosseyed and Painless, and then The Great Curve. Those are 3 longer tracks that kind of are a bit more experimental. They rock out, they kind of have moments where they climax, and then it just kind of progresses on, and it's just a really interesting take on it, because what they're doing is they're slamming all these different genres together. New wave, they're the quintessential new wave band being smashed together with, you know, punk elements, post-punk elements, and then now you're combining in, you know, world beat and Afro beat and Afro rhythm, African rhythms in there. It's just, you're never gonna find anything like this.
And the focus of this album to me, aside from David Byrne's vocals, which really, like you said, I think prophetic was a good word to use. It's like God is speaking through him, and I don't want to say speaking in tongues because that would be too funny, but
you did though.
But to me, the big focus of the album is the rhythm,
right?
Because everything plays into the rhythm, even the guitar and bass. You listen to the guitar, and a lot of the times it's this kind of like thump, quick guitar, and it really what it does is it highlights and enhances the high end of the rhythm. And then what does the bass do? It kind of thunks and pops every now and then, but it really accents the low end of the rhythm and the beats. And so they all come together to make this just absolutely hectic just kind of picture going on that then David Byrne just paints his vocals over, and it works so incredibly well.
I honestly don't think you can listen to this album and not like move your body.
Oh yeah, it's a great driving album.
It is. It absolutely.
I listened to it on the way to Des Moines last weekend, and I was like, oh man, just really
I get that. I mean, especially like late at night too, it really have a good effect.
But especially with some of the polyrhythms and the way that the vocals are layered. My absolute favorite track on this album is track 3, "The Great Curve."
That's a great song.
Because just the way that whole song is composed blows my mind. There's the parts where there's like 3 individual vocal melodies going on at the same time, a couple of which even have harmonies going along with them, and they just overlap so perfectly, along with the crazy beats that are going on. It is just so brilliantly planned, and then you get that sleazy guitar coming in that just blows your mind, and
it's almost like pre-industrial
a
little bit.
It really, well, Trent Reznor was greatly influenced. I heard him say once that this is an album he always comes back to for standards as far as production and songwriting is concerned.
What do you know? 2 of our favorite artists influenced by this album.
Exactly, and I mean, especially Brian Eno production.
Right.
What do you expect? Another forward-thinking guy. This was a match made in heaven. But another thing that I want to point out about this album that I think is one thing that maybe we can bring to the table here. I haven't heard too many people talk about this. Maybe you guys have, and I haven't done adequate research. But I think another thing that makes this so forward-thinking and so profound is the fact that most of these songs fade out. They don't just end.
Which typically I don't like that, but here it
usually
works.
Yeah, but here it does work, and here's why. Because these songs don't necessarily develop in a way that they kind of start right from the get-go, and you hear everything.
Right.
And so because of that, I feel like when the song fades out, it's like they're telling you that the song never really ends.
Right.
The song is eternal. It goes on forever, and you were just invited to a portion of it that the Talking Heads allowed you to listen to.
Great point.
And I think that's such a cool approach because it makes each song seem so infinite and timeless. And so when you look at it that way, how profound of a statement each song is, and then collectively the album is just multiplying.
Right. And when you really think about how this album was constructed, it's quite genius because you have the first 3 tracks and doing the core of the sound is that rhythmic dance and everything that Tom was just saying. But then it shifts on side 2. You have Once in a Lifetime, which you have these songs where the lyrics there's 2 songs in particular, Once in a Lifetime and I think on Listening When, where it's a little bit less stream of consciousness lyrics and more kind of like it's still kind of as in Tom York would do. Like it's short lines. It's not really descriptive, but it's in an abstract in sense, but not technically stream of consciousness. But like they make you think, and it brings you into the vocals. It brings you into the music, the presentation of it all. It was just cool to see him experiment so much within the album. The album clearly has this defined sound, but then they stretch that sound a little bit on the back half of the record. In the most specific instance of this is the closing track, The Overload, which that song, it's funny because they actually wrote that song to try to make it sound, they wanted it to sound like Joy Division, but none of the band had ever listened to Joy Division. So they were going off just what like the musical press description of Joy Division's sound was.
But a pretty damn good job just based on that.
And that song, it's an interesting way to close this record because where this record has a very upbeat mood to it a lot of the time, or at least it's something that you wouldn't have a connotation of like negativity with. That song is kind of of a depressing way to close the album. It's
Well,
serious, it's moody, it's dark.
And especially with Listening Wind coming before
Absolutely.
it, that album, oh my god, the story it tells is just chilling. And the fact that it tells a story at all, coming off of a lot of kind of one-liners and stream of consciousness lyrics, the way that they end it with Listening Wind and the Overload is really interesting because it completely shifts not only the sound of the music, but also the lyrical style, the vocal style. And it's also a good example of how, I don't think this album has a lot of dynamics within the songs, but they rely more on dynamics between the songs.
Absolutely.
And those last two tracks are really the slow spots where they kind of let you off down into the end of the album, and I think it works really well that way because, while we harp about dynamics a lot, with those first 5 or 6 tracks, if there were too many highs and lows, it actually would distract from the idea they're going for, which is to set up a consistent and moving sound and to not let that goddamn hypnotizing, entrancing beat break at all. Don't let it break, because if they did, they would really lose the effect they're going for.
Yeah, I completely agree. Tom, if you had to put a score to this classic album that everyone should listen to, that everyone should go out right now and listen to again if you've listened to it before, or make sure that you have familiarized yourself with it as soon as possible if you haven't, what would you give it?
I'd give it a 93. Now, I know that a lot of people would say this is a 100 and nothing else, but I gotta say, while I love this album, there are a couple of Talking Heads albums I prefer over it, and there are a couple tracks on this album that don't really blow me away, but that's not as much anything against this album. It's more than anything a testament to just how much I love this damn band.
Yes, that's a good point. Now, I am one of those people who think that this is the best album, one of the best albums of all time. I'm going perfect 100 on it, and when I picked tracks for this album, I told Tom when we were reviewing it, I can't pick tracks on this album. There's certain tracks I love more than other tracks. I would say there's Born Under Punches, and then everything else. But to me, it's all about, as Tom said, how they structured this album was so genius, how all the tracks work together. To me, I love every single track on this album, and I love this album as a whole. So I'm going perfect 100. I think it deserves that.
All right.
So, what do you guys think about Remain in Light? What is your favorite Talking Heads album, and what is your favorite artist who has an album or their entire discography who has been influenced by the Talking Heads? There's a lot of them, especially LCD Sound System comes to mind.
Definitely.
Please leave us a comment. This is a good discussion album to talk about. So leave us a comment at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. Please follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and let us know what albums you've been into lately that you'd like to see us review on our channel. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.